But I worked as a secretary. I ended up, the employment agency sent me to the University of Chicago. I worked for a woman who was handing out graduate fellowships. She said, "You want to do a graduate degree in history?" And I thought, I have no idea what I want to do or what. So I did that. And, you know, I wasn't a scholar. I do meticulous research, maybe because I had that experience. But that wasn't my métier. And maybe it was my good fortune that the job market, academic job market, was just dreadful in the early 70s. And so I went into business and became a marketing professional and did that for many, many years,
yeah,
14 years.
I think it's absolutely true that, you know, the person you are and the writer that you are is forged out of all of that. And a different choice, you might have been sidelined in some different channel and never really written your books.
Right. You know, I think, you know, I listened to somebody like Saul Bellows say, "I know that I was born for words." And I think you were told as a little boy that you were born for words. Nobody grows up knowing that. They get that message. Bharati Mukherjee, an astrologer, stood over her cradle and said, "You are destined to be a writer." Well, your life moves in that direction if that's the expectation of you. Mine, there were no expectations of me, and I think I became a writer by accident. I certainly wrote my whole life a lot, both poetry and short stories, as a way of exploring my emotions, but I never thought, oh, I'm a writer and I'm doing this. So to be a professional writer, I feel that's a great accident that happened to me, and I'm very happy and thankful every day that all the little things happened that let me be where I am today.
Well, certainly one visible area that your career, your other not writing career path, brought to the books is the insurance that your plots. Some of them have been constructed from what you learned in the insurance industry.
Insurance is a wonderful field to write about because, in the first place, huge amounts of money, both in insurance companies and then in the businesses that they insure. It's an open invitation, a constant invitation to fraud, so it's a great field for crime. But the other thing is, you and I have talked a lot this week about the Cubs and our mutual sad passion for them. If I wrote about baseball, it would be even worse than writing about England in the 40s. I would have so many letters from people telling me all the mistakes I got wrong, from somebody's batting stance to who hit the most home runs in 1958. When I write about insurance, they're just happy that anybody cares enough about it to write about it. They don't care if I get a few details wrong.
Probably, well, they wouldn't know enough probably to critique you. But the other thing is, too, don't you think insurance it tends to come in at the cutting edge of people's lives? I mean, insurance is there to deal with crisis.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that, but that's a really good point. I used to do support work for the company I worked for, mostly insured businesses, not so much individuals.
But even that is a crisis.
Right. My first day on the job, a woman driving on the Kennedy Expressway in Chicago was killed by one of our insureds when a big roll of wire came loose from his truck and rolled back on top of her car and crushed her. It was, and I mean, you're there for all of these tragedies. That terrible DC-10 crash 20 years ago from O'Hare to LA. We insured most of the people on that plane. We insured their companies, and we were devastated. We knew many of them personally. We came into work. The only thing we could do was come in on Saturday and cut claim checks.
Sure. But it isn't just people dying, it can be businesses dying. I mean, for many people, you know, that economic or emotional tragedy of losing a business. It was interesting, when the Chicago tunnel thing came up, I remember making a bet with various of my customers. I didn't know you then, but I said, if Sarah does not write about the tunnel, I just can't believe she's going to let that one go by. And then sure enough, you know, tunnel vision emerged soon thereafter.
Oh my goodness,
but,
I wish I'd known that.
Well, it was such a provocative thing, but it was also an event that seemed to me just had your fingerprints all over it, because there were going to be insurance issues, and there was history of the city issues, and there were just all the things you like to write about.
And you know, I never was allowed into those tunnels.
Really?
I kept trying. The city they really stonewalled me in a very good way. I mean, they were very clever and skilled about it. So fortunately, the Chicago Historical Society had a huge photo archive, and I could see all the photographs of it, but I was never able to get into them.
I have to admit, I also wondered if the tunnel then would become like the elephant, you know, in the room, i.e.,
Right.
could you write about Chicago and,
Right.
and skip the tunnel?
Right, right. There were just too many things about it. We had friends who had a contracting business. Actually, what gave me the hook for tunnel vision was these contractors were asked by one of the businesses that had been flooded out to go down into their air shaft and clean it out. And you know, one of these enormous drills that goes down 14 stories underground or something, and they found this whole colony of homeless people who had been living in the tunnels because you could get in through various abandoned buildings. All those have been sealed up now to keep homeless people out of the tunnels. Because why should they be in out of the wind and weather? Why should they not live in comfort, but live at least in dryness and warmth? Anyway, our friends found this whole family, 14 people, 18 people, who had been camping out and then had gotten trapped by the floods and were in this one ventilation shaft. And that was my hook for the story. I'd been struggling with how to, as you say, it was such an enormous thing, and then how do you write about it? And then when I heard this story, I thought, write homeless people in the tunnel, and that was where it began.
What was the genesis of Blacklist, your new book?
That started partly with learning, as we talked earlier about Hammett being imprisoned for refusing to name names. Some of it was, I had a different story in mind. I was going to write a very mean-spirited story about a publisher. I'd created a publisher that started as a small regional evangelical publisher and then grew to be a behemoth by doing things that one might rather they hadn't done, such as publishing Martin Luther's Catechism for Brown Shirts.
Good point.
And I was going to tell that story, but no, that was a ridiculous premise for me, but that was kind of where I started, was wanting to take a look at the publishing industry. But then it just seemed to fit so perfectly with the Blacklist era and how people would have coped with that.
And I really enjoyed the whole strain with the, with the African American community and the ballerina. I mean, I thought you did a wonderful job bringing in, theater and the. I'm trying to remember. We talked about it last night. The act.
Federal
Thank
Theater,
you.
right,
Yeah, there's a new book out called Me and Orson Welles.
Oh, really?
Which I truly love, from McAdam Cage, and it deals with Orson Welles as part of that Federal Theater project in New York.
Oh, that's right. He was, and I'm losing the names now. It was fascinating to me to find out what went on with these plays, and there was a offshoot, the Federal Negro Theater Project, where blacks and whites acted on stage together, and that was shocking to America in the 1930s, and it was shocking for black actors to play mainstream roles instead of just being servants or
step and fetch it.
Right. And so it became labeled as communist, just as 30 years later Martin Luther King was labeled as a communist for being an agitator. And so the project was shut down after 2 years. But it came so vividly to life for me. I think that's one of the things about writing these books. As much as reading them can be an escape, writing them can be an escape. You can just drown yourself in this alternate world that you're wrapped up in.
You bet. And then the trick is not to put too much. I think the trick is the salient details, or the things that your reader needs to know, so that they're not suddenly reading narrative nonfiction.